Okay, everyone, I've got Deb back again for another buddy read. And I'm sure most of you know Deb. She's been on the channel quite a few times now. We've done is this our third buddy read, I think?
Must be at least the third, yes. It was
Yeah.
TJ Bass and there was
Ringworld.
Ringworld, yeah. Ringworld was good.
Yeah. And so this time we did a buddy read on the Puppet Masters. And Deb has a really cool copy there from Pan.
Yes.
Yeah. I've never seen that cover before. That's pretty cool.
I hadn't either. This isn't the first time I've owned this book. I've owned it a couple of times, but I've never seen this one before, so I was quite thrilled to get it.
Yeah, and I recently reread Stranger in a Strange Land, and we were kind of discussing Heinlein, and I hadn't read many of his kind of older, kind of what really got him famous in a way. I mean, I know Stranger in a Strange Land definitely got him extra famous, but
yeah,
I hadn't read any of these older works because this came out in 1951, according to my copy in the internet. But
however,
yeah.
My Pan edition, which is a third printing from 1974, clearly says, and I don't know if we can get this to actually focus, that this was copyright by Robert A. Heinlein in 1940. Tell me if we are anywhere near focusing here, because I can't.
Yeah, that's focusing.
Yeah. So that was a bit of a rabbit hole I fell down. I can't actually resolve that. I know it was printed serially in a magazine. I also found out that this was first edited severely because it was considered too racy for the 50s. And so if you've got a 90s or later version, you've actually got deleted scenes that I don't have in this one.
Yeah, and I did, even though I have this old paperback, I heard about that. And I read an ebook that was the entire text. And then afterwards, I looked up some things because this is now the second book I've read of his recently that got heavily edited upon release. Same thing happened with Stranger in a Strange Land. And then later they came back and reinstated all of his original text. And so I read the full one. The internet will tell you some of the things that were taken out, but I didn't read both of them to compare them. But maybe some things will come up during our discussion here.
Did you feel like the expanded version in any way contributed?
Well, there was a scene in the beginning. One of the things they said that they had to edit out was in the very beginning, our main character wakes up in his apartment and there's this blonde woman in his bed and he doesn't even know her name. And then he races off to go do his business and she's never brought up again. So that, I don't know. I mean, I wasn't alive in the 50s. I don't know how that would have gone over. I don't see how it added much to the story in that part. I know there was also some extra references to the Soviet Union, possibly in the unedited one that was in there. And then some things going on we'll get in later, another thing that maybe was in the unedited section. But I kind of wish I would have read the original one because they cut out about a quarter of the book. And I think I know the section they cut out. It did seem to, even though it's a pretty action-packed book, one part of it kind of drug on for me a little bit. And I kind of wish I would have read the edited version.
I think that might account for the thing I noticed this time, but which I never noticed in previous readings. I have read this book before, by the way, but it was probably about 20 years ago. So a lot of it was like reading something totally new. I did occasionally remember something while it was happening. Other times I had no idea. But this time I noticed that the pace could be a little bit uneven at times. You had these jumps where I wasn't quite sure why someone was doing something or how they got somewhere. And it might be that was part of the editing or part of the serialization. It's not a big thing. It shouldn't stop anyone from reading it, but it was there.
Yeah, it would when I come across these, it would be, if I had the time, it'd be interesting to kind of read them side by side. I don't even know how exactly I would do that. I know Richard Rempel has done that a few times where he's compared different versions to see like the differences are. But um, I think this one would probably be fine, whichever version you get. I'm sure most of the main scenes and uh,
Mm.
ideas are in both. I guess we'll talk about what this one is about, sort of first.
Yep. A bit of an outline.
Yeah, and just kind of real briefly, this is an alien invasion type story. He brought in flying saucers, which were kind of a thing going on back then. But I think this is one of the first science fiction books that dove deep into a flying saucer trope. Maybe not the first.
I think it might have been the first one that went full on into the alien body snatcher notion, unless you include John Wyndham. But even so, this is a mind control element that I don't know that anyone else had ever done before at this stage. Though, feel free to correct me out the internet if I'm wrong. But this was the earliest one I've encountered.
Yeah, and this was a few years before Jack Finney's Invasion of the Body Snatchers or Body Snatchers, and you can. I've read both of those now, or both that one and this one, and you can see where he kind of borrowed some ideas from Heinlein. Yeah, so that's kind of the main trope in this one. Just real briefly, I would say it's fairly action packed. It has a kind of a breakneck beginning. It throws you right in. There's so many things that happen. There's a lot of stuff that that happens in this, like, around 200-page book. And we won't go over every scene or anything like that, but I really enjoyed it. It did feel like reading something from 1951, and some of Heinlein's things that I'm starting to pick up on are definitely in this one.
He had some themes, yes.
Yeah.
One of the things that stood out for me in the beginning is how much it felt like a 1940s, 1950s type gangster tough guy PI. It read like that, even though our main character isn't quite the PI. But having not read anything from that genre for a while, that's how it seemed to me to begin with, and I liked it.
And the novel takes place in 2007, I think it is. That's the future he came up with. But besides some tech and a few differences in society, it does really feel like the 50s to me. And I wouldn't say that was a bad thing. There was like a kind of a neat vibe with this one that was unique. What were your thoughts?
I have no real knowledge of 50s America except through books and the occasional movies. To me, this feels like Robert Heinlein universe more than anything else. And I've always seen Heinlein as someone who's, in his writing, really wanted to challenge morality and social customs. And that really comes out in this one, much like it does in Strange in the Strange Land, I think. He really wants to slam down those customs that he doesn't believe in. And so I think that's why his original started with Sam in bed with a woman whose name he doesn't even know, which would be very, very controversial in the 50s, and that's why it was cut.
Yeah,
I think the future tech is done in a really subtle way. So you've got all these things that are definitely future tech. Some of them aren't even around today. They were his vision of the future. Things that are very present today, which are completely absent from his future world. So it's that Robert Heinlein universe, what he thinks the future will be from the 40s or the 50s. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, I actually enjoyed this one. I give this like a B, maybe like a B plus, maybe around 4 stars or whatever you want to call it. And I would recommend it to people. There, we'll go through, as we go through it in a little bit more detail, there's definitely some things that some readers might not like, but it is a great alien invasion story that has this kind of I wouldn't even say claustrophobic, this paranoia going on kind of the whole time that he pulls off really well, I think.
It's absolutely got that paranoia, aliens among us, who is a friend and who is an enemy feel. And I would argue that in terms of tropes, it's also got a little bit of a hero's journey, because our main character, Sam, he starts off as a bit of a blundering young man, but by the end of it, he's clearly evolved into Heinlein's traditional competent man. So there's definitely a journey there for him. Yeah, I think this book does a lot of tropes.
Yeah. So maybe we'll start off. We'll kind of give everyone a taste of what this one is about, and then we're definitely going to bring up some spoilers later. But I'll probably just put like a timestamp in the video and warn people a little bit first. But do you want to start off with kind of how it starts, or you want me to?
Okay, I'll take the start. So it begins in 2007, according to the internet. I don't remember seeing anywhere in the book an actual year identified, but the internet believes it's 2007, and who am I to argue with the internet? Our setting is the far future for the 40s or 50s, whenever it was written. And you've got a Earth that is dramatically different from when it was written. It survived a nuclear war between Russia-ish and America-ish. And there's these subtle references to bomb sites and things since the war and before the war. Though apparently, in Heinlein's version of this future, the Cold War continued after the Hot War, and Russia and China never really divided. So it's a bit of a different setting, but he doesn't go into it too heavily. We start off with this mysterious underground, not CIA, not FBI, more secret than all of the above organization. And our main protagonist comes to the office. He gets told that his name is now Sam Kavanagh, and he goes, whatever. We get the impression that he's had many different faces, and cosmetics keeps changing it. He says he doesn't even remember what he originally looked like. Many different names. And he's being sent on a mission by the old man who runs this agency. He's told that their co-agent is called Mary Kavanagh. She's this redhead, and Sam is immediately attracted to her, but she's a bit aloof. And he's told that on this mission, she's his sister, which he thinks is a dirty trick. And off they go on this mission. What would you like to say about the mission?
Well, yeah, I think it was pretty good because Sam is so dedicated to this mission, even though he's attracted to Mary. He's like you said, what have you done to me, old man? Now I can't even follow that train of thought. I have to pretend she's my sister because whatever we're going to be doing has to be legitimate, you know?
Yeah.
And so there was a kind of a mysterious flying saucer crash, and the news started reporting it, and something got cut off, and there was some shenanigans going on. We like that word. And so the old man wants to go there and see it firsthand and try to figure out what's going on. So that he's kind of the uncle, and he's got Sam and Mary are his niece and nephew, their brother and sister. And they're going to pretend they're tourists and go check out this flying saucer. And they've got it set up like a tourist attraction, and they're charging money to go see it. And right away, they can tell someone just kind of cobbled this thing together with plywood and whatever. So they know that this isn't a real flying saucer, but everybody's acting a little different. And after they kind of leave the scene, the old man asks Sam and Mary what's going on, what their impressions were. And we find out Mary, she kind of has this ability to attract men in a way. She has some other skills, but this is some of the things that maybe didn't age quite so well. But none of the men there were really giving her any notice or anything. She thought that was very odd. People weren't acting normal. And then Sam put together a bunch of things about how could they have had the money to build this. So something is off. and they wanted to go down to the radio station that first broke the report and go see what's going on there. Anything to add to that part?
I will. It's not quite spoilery because it's right at the front of the novel, so you're going to get it right up. The reason those 3 top agents, important people, are going there themselves is because 6 agents, good agents, had been sent in and just vanished. And the old man wanted to know why. He also has what seems like a satellite map, and they do have satellites in this future, of the landing site. And it doesn't quite triangulate with the site that these farm boys are pretending is their hoax flying saucer, and that they're getting people to go and see. So you've got a set scenario there that you obviously know something's up. And when they try to leave the tourist attraction flying saucer, they refuse to go into it, even though everyone tries to get them to go down into this dark area. They don't go. Instead, they leave and they try to find the site of this satellite image for the original flying saucer, and they are blocked from getting to see it.
So, the bridge was out. I forgot about that part.
The bridge was out, and then there was a fire, and then all this stuff happened.
Yeah, that's right. So then they go to the radio station, and they're speaking with the station manager, and something doesn't seem right, and the old man gives a command, and out of nowhere, Sam shoots this guy dead, basically. And then they notice there's something riding on this guy on his neck, a slug, and this is this alien invader who's come down, and they can take control of people. The people can kind of act normal, speak normal, because there's some subtle differences. But when they were talking to the station manager, when they're talking to everyone at this tourist site, they seem somewhat normal, but there's just subtle nuance that they knew something was up. So now they find this slug, and they capture it, but it dies, and they take it back to their base and eventually to the president, right?
Yes. The slug, by the time they get back to their base, is completely decomposed, and their science officer can't do anything with it. I really loved the description of the slug, alien invader, whatever. It sounds like this classic invertebrate that just attaches in, and we get told that when it's off the host, the person or animal it's riding, you'll end up with all these little red spots as if it's suckered itself in multiple points. When I first read this, I imagined a sort of spinal tap going into your spine, but I don't think that's quite right.
Yeah.
Anyway, yes, they go to the president, and we find out that this organization has strong links to the president, but no matter what the old man does, he can't convince him to declare state of national emergency because the president keeps saying there's not enough evidence.
Yeah, and then at the very end, the president says, and this station manager you said you killed, he just gave a newscast.
Yes.
Right?
Now, that was never really explained, was it?
No, that I was explaining this to my wife, and she even asked that question. And we'll get into this a little bit later, because I guess it's not too spoilerish yet, but when this slug is attached to someone, they're completely taking control of them. But there is the sense, even early on, that if it's removed, maybe the person could be saved. We'll find out way more about that as you read the book. But in this case, you're wondering, he got reanimated somehow. Like, did they fully kill him? It was implied, I believe, that he was dead. They left him there, right?
I don't remember him being dead or not. I know that he was shot, but then they sort of turned him over and were splitting his clothes off him to check out this hump on his back. And I suppose because we'll find out later in the book that the slugs can repossess a host that has survived a previous chance. So maybe if there was another one near enough, they could have got back on the station manager. I don't know. It's not explained. But at that point, we still don't know too much about how they operate. So it's all a bit mysterious.
And the weapons they're using are almost like these heat ray guns. Some other pretty cool tech. They have portable phones, and
Yeah,
Sam even has these little speakers that are doing bone conducting audio, which
yeah.
is tech we have today. So there was some pretty interesting tech, and they have flying cars so they can get around the country really quick.
Mm. I really like the tech too. They've got this overspeed scanner, as they call it. Um, it never really reached the public. It was only secret agents could have it. But the way they describe it, it sounds very much like YouTube, to be honest. Only they still have. They don't really have screens like you'd have in a modern world. Their screens seem to still be pretty much old school 60s TVs. So that's an interesting thing.
Yeah, and they'll also take these drugs that allow their relative time to slow down, so they could condense a lot of like information, what to them feels like maybe a whole day, but in reality only took like an hour. It just like accelerates their ability to absorb data and stuff. There's some pretty interesting things in
He
this one.
mentions those ones in passing, but right at the beginning, when Sam wakes up, in my version at least, he's really tired and exhausted. They don't tell us why. Apparently, there was a reason that we don't get told.
Yeah.
And he takes some other drug as a wake up. It sounds
Yeah.
like a slug of coffee almost, but he goes from being sleepy and not quite there to fully awake like that. So,
Yeah. It said like it rearranged his whole mind and then put it back together the way it should have been or whatever. Yeah.
yeah.
So then the president kind of dismisses the whole thing and says this isn't a big deal. The old man says, I'm going down to Florida. I need a break. But Mary and Sam get curious and they go to the library kind of separately. They end up kind of finding themselves there later. But they start researching about this UFO phenomenon, and they find a lot more evidence than they realized was out there. And they find out that there's something to do with like a 30-year cycle of sightings. And they kind of together say, there's way more to this. We have to go back in. And they go down and grab the old man off of his lawn chair and get him to start up another mission to go check it out again.
And now we go into that really cool thing that happens to Sam next. And I'm not sure. I think that might be spoiler territory.
Yeah, I think this is borderline spoiler territory. I think if you hang on for just a little while, there's this very cool setup. It's like very disturbing. It's this paranoia and this whole alien presence is really cool. If the book doesn't sound good yet, I think if you get through that part, you'll almost be hooked and want to read this, because it was like my favorite part of the whole book, pretty much.
Okay, then tell us about it.
Well, so Sam, they decide, let's go check it out again. And if the station manager's back alive, let's go back to the station. So Sam and two other agents, Mary stays, the old man stays back, but Sam and two other agents go back to Des Moines, Iowa to check this out again. I think they go try to check out the landing site first and just find some weirdness there, but they don't get too many clues.
Yeah.
And then they go back to the station and everyone's acting really weird, and they realize that everyone has been taken over by these slugs, basically. There's kind of like this shootout and all this kind of stuff, and they end up going back to base. And after they get back to base, they find out that one of the agents had got a slug on him, which then turned loose inside their compound in a way, and ultimately ends up getting on our main character. And the way it was told was really well done, because the whole story is told in the first person, and then all of a sudden the narrator is talking bizarre.
Yeah.
Because he's possessed by this thing and he just knows he needs to get out of this place as fast as possible. And now you're in the mind of a possessed main character by these aliens while it's trying to take him and get more people under the alien control.
Mm. Yeah, I thought this part was pure genius, and I remembered a little bit of it. It obviously impacted me more significantly when I read it the first time. But that whole thing in the secret base where they realize the slug is loose somewhere around them and they don't know who's being hag-ridden, as they call it. And the old man says, okay, everyone has to strip. And there's a lot of pushback because they're still 50s in mentality there. But eventually that whole stripping down sets the scene for the later Project Bareback that the president institutes, because at that point they think it has to ride in between the shoulders on the back. And if it can't, thank you for the addition there. And if it can't get there, if you can see everyone's back, then theoretically you can tell who's got a slug or not. But yeah, that change in tone from Sam was really interesting. And I think it was a bit of genius writing because it let us see inside the world of the slugs, what they're doing, some of the things they're achieving and how they're doing it in a way that just telling us would never have really done. So that was brilliant.
Yeah, and even Sam, a bit of Sam is still in there, and he doesn't seem to mind. That's how this alien kind of works, where it's controlling him. It's being the puppet master, but the puppet is going along with it, even though he knows in a way what's going on. He has no ability to like fight it. He's just under the possession of this thing now.
His will is totally submissive from the second he's taken over to the will of the master, as they call it. And so all his knowledge, all his experience, all his physical prowess, they all belong to the alien. And it's really creepy. The only thing that's lacking is will, because they believe, people that are hag-ridden completely believe that the best thing in Earth is having a master, and they wouldn't want it any other way. So there's not even really any fight against that, except for once later on.
Yeah, so this part was genius, like you said, and it leads up to another really awesome scene coming up a little bit. But so Sam is just kind of making more whatever you want to call it, like possessed humans.
Puppets.
Like he's getting puppets. Yeah, he's getting cells shipped to him, and he's convincing people to come into these areas, and he's getting them ridden by these slugs and turning more and more people over to the puppet masters and just going about his business.
Yeah, and they managed to capture one very influential person who's a part of some boys club, I don't know, library or congress or something. And so they're managing to trap a whole heap of really influential key figures, which is their goal. But we also learn here about this direct communication, or as it's called later, conjugation. So if you've got two people who are possessed, they expose their backs, sit back to back, and the aliens communicate directly without their puppets actually knowing what they're talking about. So while the master knows everything the puppet knows, the puppet doesn't always know everything the master knows, and that's important later on.
Yeah, that was very interesting. He has a couple of those sessions, and he doesn't know what's going on. They're having this conversation behind his back, and the next thing he knows, he's going and doing more things, And so he does this for a while. I forget how long this goes on. Days, maybe a week.
It must be more than a week, because this is where we learn that the puppet masters don't actually know how to take very good care of the humans they're riding. They don't let them stop to sleep. They don't let them stop to bathe. So hygiene and plagues and all that sort of stuff. And they don't even let them stop to eat sometimes. So we find Sam at one point actually collapses because he hasn't had anything to eat for so long. So that was after 3 or 4 days he'd had to go without anything to eat, I think, when he collapsed. So we know that he was there for probably about a week at least.
Mm-hmm. And then eventually Sam, he's getting in a cab. He's got something to go do. And this person keeps insisting on sharing the cab with him. And he ends up getting in there, and this person disables the slug off of his back and kind of saves him, and it turns out that it's the old man. So the old man had tracked him down and kind of saved him, and he takes him back to their base. And I think, is this where they managed to save the slug and get a live one?
They do save the slug. They take it back and it's studied by scientists.
It's put on
it's put on an orangutan, and then they've got more. No, at that point they've only got the one. It gets put on an orangutan, and later they decide to put it on a volunteer because the orangutan can't actually be questioned, but a human could be.
Yeah, and this was a scene that was pure genius as well, because Sam had just kind of recuperated. He hadn't been eating, sleeping. He was kind of in the infirmary, and after a few days, he's kind of coming back out of it. And the old man comes up to him and says, "Hey, other people that got possessed by this have died, but you managed to survive. So we need you to go in here. We're going to put the slug on you, and we're going to interrogate this alien intelligence and find out what's really going on." Sam says, "No way, I can't do it.
Yeah.
I refuse to do it." He's having these like flashbacks, and this just feels sick to his stomach. And they say, "Okay, well, if you're not going to do it, will you just come in the room with us and help interrogate this thing and be there to witness it, since you have been under the possession of one of these things?" So he finally agrees to do that.
Volunteer.
And then they bring the volunteer in, and it's Mary. And so he says, "You can't let that go on her. I now volunteer." And you realize how cunning this old man is and how malicious he was. Because, I mean, he claims later that Mary was just willing to do it because Sam wasn't. But you knew in the back of his mind that Sam wouldn't let that happen to Mary. So,
yeah. And it's even sneakier than that. That's the bare bones of those whole scenes, but they are really good scenes. They're exciting. You don't see it coming. Sam doesn't see it coming, and then it's just shoved in his face. By now, I think we know that Sam isn't his real name, and there's another one, but I still like Sam better.
Yeah. Yeah, he kind of goes with that one. And somewhere around here, too, we find out that the old man is really his dad.
Yeah.
Somewhere around in this section of the book.
He's been calling him son all the way through, but I think it's around about the point where he lets Sam take the slug on his back again that we find out it's an actual physical relationship. So, yeah.
Yeah, so they interrogate Sam with the slug on him and find out that these are aliens who come from one of, is it
Titan.
What is it?
I think it's the Titan, yeah. And that something in the rotation of Titan around, it does rotate around Jupiter as well as around the sun. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a moon of Jupiter. Yeah.
Yeah. So something about the rotation around Jupiter and the rotation around the sun, it's hinted correspond with this 30-year cycle of flying saucers and kidnapped people that Mary and Sam earlier found out about in the library.
Yep. And so they learn a lot that these creatures do require some sort of host in a way. They can't really do much on their own. They come from Titan. Humanity has never been out of the solar system as far as Titan. They've been to Mars and Venus, I think.
So I think that's part of their whole future history thing, is that Heinlein's view of the world. We've been to the moon. I think there's a moon base. We've been to Mars, and I think there's people on Mars. But Venus becomes very influential later in how the aliens got to Earth this time and how Mary fits into the story. Because when they first go to see the flying saucer, Sam is told by the old man that the most important person to protect in this team is Mary. She's the one we can't go without. Protect her over me, sort of thing. And we later find out why, and it's linked to Venus.
Yeah, and I forgot that part I didn't put that together until you just said that, where there was an importance around her in the very beginning. And he kind of, now that is very clever, because he does kind of make you think, or he made me think, that she has this, ability maybe to notice if someone isn't acting normal, because she becomes kind of the personal bodyguard of the president for a while. And I was thinking that that was her importance. And now, yeah, after finishing it, I see where you're going with that. Yeah.
One of the things we're told about quite clearly in the book is that any human who's hag-ridden completely loses all sex drive and all of their gender type behaviors. And Mary's little "I'm a sexy little girl" routine, she says, always gets some sort of response from men. Either they're attracted to it, or they're repelled by it, or they despise her, but she always gets some sort of response. And I know that's a bit dated in its perspective, but you can tell if you're walking into a room and you're chatting with people, you can tell who's interested. That's a thing. So I didn't really put as much emphasis on that. I thought it's interesting. She clearly knows more about the slugs than Sam, and she knows things that the old man doesn't know. So she must have some back history. And because she's so coy about her backstory with Sam, even up to the point where they get married, I think I was always expecting it to be the back history rather than her ability to. And I don't know if that's from my memory from the previous book, or if I always knew that.
Yeah, that caught me by surprise. So they interrogated the aliens. Sam kind of, he's going through another kind of recuperation after going through this again, and he needs a break. And him and Mary go off to his cabin, end up getting married around this time, right? But I think you hinted at this earlier, or you talked about it. At this point, most people that aren't in this red zone, so it's mostly Iowa and I think Louisiana, most of the rest of the country seems to be fairly normal. And to prove that you're okay, people are going kind of shirtless and always having their back exposed to kind of prove that you're not being hag-ridden. And so that's kind of become a norm now. And so Sam and Mary go off, and they're kind of isolated away from a lot of people, and they kind of get married, have their little bit of a honeymoon. And they notice something that happens to their cat, where a slug tried to get on their cat, and they're thinking, this is new, And by the time they get back to civilization, they go through this quarantine where now they're making everybody strip down completely naked, because it seems these slugs have learned that they can attach themselves to pretty much anywhere on a human. It doesn't have to be on the back. And so that phase of finding people out evolved now into basically most of the civilized world is a big nudist colony.
They call it Project Suntan.
Yeah.
And that also addresses the fact that there's increasing sense of urgency throughout the book of, like, first of all, they're taking over more and more, and that red zone is growing, and the orange zone keeps creeping, and the green zone keeps shrinking. But also winter is approaching, and they're accepting the fact that Project Suntan isn't going to survive in all of America over winter.
Yeah. And after I finished the book, I saw some reviews, and some people were commenting on this part of the book and saying Heinlein just wanted nude people walking around or something. But I think, in a way, if you think about it, he sort of predicted some things that happened after the 9/11 attacks, because we lost a lot of personal liberties in a way for the sake of national security. And the characters in the book, there was one character saying, once we get these slugs out of here, we'll go back to normal. And they're like, no, we're never going back to normal. Don't you understand? We'll never be 100% back to normal, and we'll just get used to it. And he shows that in the book. Everyone got used to being just, shirtless for a while, and then they got used to being naked, and then it was just like became part of the norm.
Yeah. And Heinlein had very strong opinions about totalitarian, authoritarian societies and the good of the citizen and all that sort of thing. And that comes out in all of his books. And I think that the things that he was interested in and his opinions are far more nuanced than a lot of people think from just reading Starship Troopers, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I didn't know that you'd lost a lot of. I didn't know that you'd had that sort of societal change following 9/11, though it completely makes sense. And he's very right that if you've got a society that owns a liberty or a freedom, and that's taken away, the chances of it being returned are quite limited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now that's where everyone's at, is complete paranoia that these things could attach to people anywhere. And they're trying to, I think at this point they decide they want to go into that red zone and really try to clean it up. And Sam goes in and finds out it's way worse than they thought. That probably the majority of everyone in those zones are have been taken over. There was talk about maybe sending them into Russia to see what's going on over there, because they weren't trusting the news that was coming out of Russia. And then we get kind of this was kind of the slow spot for me, where it did kind of drag out a bit. And I don't know if the uncut version had extra scenes in here.
This is actually the bit that seemed the most jerky to me as well. His whole trip to Kansas, it was Kansas, I think, Kansas City. It seemed frenetic. It seemed poorly thought out. It didn't really make any sense why he'd be doing it or why he would have been sent there. The Russia comment made even less sense, because it turns out that the old man knew that they were already in Russia. And in fact, there's the comment, it's like with Russia, who can tell? So that's the Cold War still in action there.
Yeah.
But with the Kansas thing, the interesting part, and it was interesting, it was just really hard to follow. It's like I don't really know what he was trying to do there, and I'm not entirely sure that he did either. So maybe something was cut from that. But the interesting part is that if that whole area is hag-ridden, then no matter how many, they're trying to figure out how many aliens could have fit on one saucer. And I think by now they already know that other saucers have come down. But even so, it seems a disproportionate number of aliens that you can get out of one flying saucer compared to the entire population that's been hag-ridden. And that's when you find that they can do this sort of invertebrate fusion, and one hag can split into two hags.
Yeah.
And then inhabit the whole world.
Yeah, so they've been multiplying and spreading and basically taken over a big part of the country. And around this time, they get news of a flying saucer that crashed, I think, down near Louisiana. And they get down there right on the scene. And this is where it finally picks back up for setting up the conclusion. And they get down there. We got the old man, we got Sam and Mary and some other people. And they find this saucer, and apparently all the slugs are dead in here, so it's safe to go inside. And they go inside, and it's very strange and bizarre. And they get back to the kind of final chamber of this thing that's almost like an aquarium, and it's got human bodies floating around in it. They're like in the center of this thing, right?
It's fantastic. That last flying saucer going into it was fantastic writing. And you find those little almost human-like aliens lying around who are dead. They're not humans.
They're like elfish.
Hmm?
They were elf-like, kind of.
Yeah, he said elf-like, and we gather by this point that these are a race that aren't oxygen breathers or aren't humans, and they can't really use them to infiltrate Earth, but they were using them on a different planet. Is that right?
I think the idea was that they were the native, another native life form on Titan.
Right.
And since these slugs are kind of immobile without a host, they were the first host to the slugs. So these slugs possessed them. They were their puppet masters. They got them to like fly these ships and get to Earth and other places in the solar system. But they're this elfish race is another one that's just been kind of taken over and possessed by these alien slugs. And then in this chamber, we have the old man. He starts talking to Mary and asking her about her childhood. And this is where we get all the backstory about what happened to Mary.
Do we want to talk about that?
Yeah, we could. I mean, I guess we're all in.
Okay. I love this part. Sam is a bit of a helicopter partner, and he sees that it's distressing Mary, so he really butts in and he stops the old man from continuing his interrogation. But for us as readers, it's clear that all of this is something that Mary has encountered in her past, and this is where we can really see her importance to the whole invasion element. So after we've got the tour of this spaceship with its aquariums full of hosts suspended in whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, really eerie, and it would make a fantastic film. I know they've made films of this book, but I don't think they've ever done that.
No.
So we leave there and we go back to base, and that's when this deep hypnosis interrogation of Mary starts to take place. And we find out that Mary was first found on Venus as a small child wandering in the swamps, and she'd had what they're calling 9-day fever, which is unique to Venus. And Sam has already figured out that from a name that she dropped at one stage, that she was a member of some unusual cult that went off and did their own thing in Antarctica for a while before leaving Antarctica and then going to Venus to establish their own thing there. That's where we go. They left Antarctica in 1974, the far future of 1974. And then Mary is found about 10 years after their settlement vanishes, and she's just a little girl, so no one connects her to them. And then we find out that Mary had been one of those people in the aquarium in sort of suspended animation for, 10 years?
Mm-hmm.
Before she was released with the slug, and the slug came off her dying in this 9-day fever on Venus. Sorry, have I taken us away?
And she had this like natural immunity to the 9-day fever that none of the other humans had and none of the slugs had. So that was why she was the only one left, right? Mm-hmm. Yep. So now they have this idea, like, we know what can kill the slugs, this 9-day fever, but it also kills humans. And we can't immunize humans, because then when the slug attaches to them, then they'll be immune. And so they have to try to figure out how to use this information to try to eradicate these slugs off the face of the earth. And this was another one. I thought it was pretty clever. This is the real coming of age of Sam, because he kind of gets in there and starts taking charge. And I did like that scene where the old man, he says, well, you took over. You're the one calling the shots. You don't have the title, but you're in charge now. What do you want me to do, sir?
And Sam goes, no, I don't want to be in charge. And he says, too late, bud.
Yeah, it's too late. He's like, I want to retire. He's like, nope, you're in charge. You got to see this thing through. You're the one that stood up and stepped up to the plate. You got to follow this all the way through. So they come up with this idea they find out that the 9-day fever is called that because it usually kills a human in about 9 days, but it only took about 3 days for it to kill the slugs. And so they have this window of time. And so they devise a scheme to go in there, infect everything in this red zone. After the 3 days and all the slugs die, they can go in there and kind of vaccinate all the humans that are left before they die. And that's kind of the plan they go with.
I actually really enjoyed that part because the whole biological warfare scenario, it was a bit clumsy and it was old. It's aged. But I did like what they were doing with it because biological warfare was pretty new concept back then. And we haven't mentioned that all the animals pretty much are vanishing because early on we find out that the slugs can ride cats. They rode dogs even before they found out about the cats. They've been known on horses. They've been known on bulls. And we later find these wild scenarios where in areas that have been taken over by the aliens, they have basically emptied the zoos by putting slugs on tigers. I think there's an elephant there somewhere.
Yeah, rhinoceros, I think, right?
And they just set these loose on the people that are trying to take back the zone. So the way that they devised to get the slugs into the zone is interesting. You can't put them on volunteers because the volunteers will know what's happening and the slug just won't go there. So they put them on dogs and animals. I think there were a lot of apes involved, and they just get run into the area. And as soon as the slug drops off the animal and jumps onto a human, it's sharing the infection. And as soon as the slug goes into conjugation or direct communication, it's sharing it with the other slug. So it spreads apparently really, really fast.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, it was a pretty clever way that wasn't just like go in there and nuke the whole area, which they did think about doing. And so it worked for the most part. They feel like they're always going to be battling this thing. They don't know how many else are loose around, but they have a way to combat them. And in the there's kind of one final section in the whole, like everyone goes in there to kind of give the vaccines or the cures. And the old man is even in there administering these cures to everyone. And somehow he gets taken over by one of like the last surviving slugs. And he baits Sam in. He gets him. He straps him down, and they're going to take off to the Yucatan Peninsula, I think, and like start a whole new colony down there. And this is where Sam sees the thing start splitting on his back, where it's going to turn into two. Yeah, it's very creepy. And so Sam has to think his way out of this one. He kind of hits the controls, so it's going to crash, and it ends up jarring him loose, and they end up crashing. And the old man, I thought he was dead, and we're going full spoilers here, but I mean, it was a very kind of touching scene a little bit there at the end. You think he's dying, but then at the end, it turns out that he did make it. So,
yeah. And I think that I think Heinlein did the end quite well there. You had that whole crashing scene. You really don't know what's going to happen to them. It's two men and a slug plummeting down towards the ground. And Sam is certain that he's going to die, and he thinks that his dad, the old man, is already dead. And then we just jump. So Heinlein doesn't actually explain what happened. He doesn't really give us the aftermath of what happened or any of that. He just jumps from there to a completely new episode, which is that final hurrah for mankind that he does often do. So,
yep. And that's the mission, to go root these things out at their source. So they're going to do a 12-year journey. Sam and Mary are going to be aboard. They figured they could have like 3 kids on the way. And then they're going to try to take care of these slugs at Titan. So
home base, yeah.
Yeah, and then the old man is there kind of to send them off. He's going to stay there with their first child. So pretty good little, good rousing scene at the end.
Yeah. I forgot that the first child was staying behind. We know that Mary's pregnant earlier on because one of Sam's concerns while she's undergoing all that deep hypnosis is that she might miscarry from the stress. So we know she's already pregnant there, but I didn't remember that the first one was staying behind. So
yeah. So overall, yeah, I enjoyed this one. I thought it was mostly action packed. Some of I would say like the first third of this is just nonstop action and intrigue and twists, and it was one of the best like starts of a novel I've read in a while, I think.
yeah. I would, yeah, pretty action packed all the way through, but the first third really draws you in. And it's so full of information. It isn't just action packed. You learn about the world, you learn about their tech, you learn about their society. There's just heaps happening. So, yeah, I really enjoyed it. I will say that in terms of dating, we've mentioned a couple of things. Mary really dates it as well, aside from the sexy little act that she puts on earlier. She's one of these prototypes, in my opinion, that Heinlein does a lot. He'll have a woman, he'll make this strong. She's always pretty, but often in a non-traditional way. I think he calls her Saurian here once, actually. Redhead. And she's smart, and she's always carrying a lot of guns. And
yeah, she loves guns
herself. And all this great character. She's always got snappy retorts. And you really enjoy the female character that he's created. And then she hooks up with someone and she becomes a submissive little wife who goes around going, yes, dear, no, dear, and virtually nothing else, which is disappointing, but very Heinlein.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely noticed that as once they kind of became an item and got married, then she completely changed.
Yep.
And part of that could have been maybe some of her awareness of what happened to her, I guess, but it was definitely noticeable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't think that was just me.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm glad I read this. It was a little different than the other. I've only read 2 other Heinleins, and I do want to read more from this era of his, even some of his juveniles. I know they're a little bit more sophisticated than a lot of people's juvenile stories that they were writing back in the day. And he is a great writer. I mean, for his much controversy that's around the guy and all of his ideas and everything, like you can't deny what a great writer he was, especially for something from 1951 here.
He was one of the ones that definitely got me into science fiction. And I know that he's not everyone's cup of tea, and I don't judge that at all. I can see why, but I like his writing. I like his future vision for how the world and the solar system will be, and those small irritations I can live with for the writing and the stories. So I know you read Stranger in the Strange Land recently. What's the other one you've read?
Starship Trooper.
Ah.
Yeah. Which I think those are kind of his like probably 2 most popular and controversial for whatever reasons. I didn't find them to be very controversial, but then I know a bit about his Lazarus Long stories that came out after that, these big giant novels, 900 pagers and stuff. I don't know if I want to get to those.
I've got some Heinlein recommendations for you. So, long before you think about the huge chonker ones, the first Lazarus Long one is Methuselah's Children. It's probably 200 pages at best or worst. It is really, really worth reading. It's fascinating future vision. It's there are action-packed scenes. There's a lot of first contact type scenarios in it, and everything that I've ever heard anyone not like about Time Enough for Love and all of those other ones, none of that applies to Methuselah's Children, but no one seems to read it anymore, which is a great shame.
It's on the list.
I would recommend that one.
Yeah, and when we were deciding we kind of decided to do a Heinlein, and then we were kind of torn between the Puppet Masters and Double Star. So I definitely want to read Double Star, and I want to read The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. And a lot of his, like, I think 1950s novels. So Yeah.
Yeah, they're all good. One of his newer novels, and I can't remember when it was written, but I feel like it might have been 90s, is called Friday. Have you ever heard of that one?
Yep, I do have a copy of that one too. Yep.
Okay. Well, when I read Friday, that kind of obliviated a lot of the earlier Heinlein I'd written because it was far more contemporary in writing style. It is large, but it's a fast read for me at least. Um, and a lot of the elements to the Puppet Masters reminded me a lot of Friday. So I feel like in Friday he revisits a lot of the concepts that he's just developing in the Puppet Masters. So you've got this secret agency, and Friday has a secret agency as well. It's run by Old Man Baldwin. And when I first started rereading the Puppet Masters this time, I actually thought it was the same agency and the same character. The internet says that they're actually different, but you've got very much the same thing. You've got this overarching organization run by the grumpy old man prototype that he likes so much.
Which is kind of him in a way.
I would imagine.
Yeah.
I would imagine. I think half of himself, he halfway sees himself as the grumpy old man, and he halfway sees himself as the all-man hero that his young characters always seem to be. So a bit of both. But yeah, Friday's good. I would say that you would probably like to read a bit of his earlier stuff from the 50s before you got there, but it's a good book.
Yeah, I definitely want to read more from him. When I was younger, I tried a few. The only one I really liked was Stranger in a Strange Land. I DNF'd a few and kind of thought myself to be a Heinlein hater in a way. But honestly, I don't think I really gave him a chance. I was starting probably on the wrong novels, and I think he is kind of he can be misunderstood at times, and I think people go and run with that. And yeah, there probably is some credence to some of his criticism and stuff, but I think there's always another side to everything. So
do you
definitely
remember
glad I'm giving him another chance.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah,
He's certainly worth it. Do you remember what those early ones that you didn't like were?
So it was one of the big ones. It might have been. So I got in a phase in my 20s where I loved like 1,000-page books. I was like looking for all these giant books to read, and I was in a store and found one of his books, and it was I think it was a Lazarus Long book. And I started reading it, and it was probably out of order, and I didn't know what was going on, and I just didn't like it. And then I tried reading A Moon is a Harsh Mistress, and for some reason I just couldn't get into it. But I know if I read that now, I would get right into it.
I can't wait to hear what you think of it. The Moon is a Harsh Mistress is the only Heinlein I have never been able to finish.
Oh.
I keep trying, but so far I've just never made it through that one.
Yeah, from what I can tell, it is got a lot of his negative qualities in that one.
Many people love it. I just can't. For me, the character that starts off as your protagonist in Moon, I can't. My brain just can't seem to triangulate it. So I just lose interest in that one. And I feel like it's a failure for me. I'm going to keep on trying with it because every other Heinlein that I've read, I've enjoyed. And many of them I've read many times and enjoyed them every single time. So Moon is a Harsh Mistress is my Waterloo here.
Well, sometimes it's just not the right time and place, and you got to understand that, or otherwise you end up hate reading it or forcing yourself to read it, and then that could be even worse for your impression of the author and stuff. So yeah. Well, this has been fun once again, Deb. Great conversation, and
as always,
we'll always be looking for the next buddy read then too. So
yeah, I love the buddy reads. Talking with someone about a book you've just read, you always get more out of it, and I really like it.
And some books lend themselves for this like dialogue and discussion, and I think this one definitely did. So
there's so much to discuss, so much more we could have discussed. But
Yeah.
I think
Really. But thanks again, and for everybody out there, go check out Deb's channel. She's the omnivorous reader. She reads it all.
I do. Thanks, Sarah, for hosting once again, and yeah, it's been fun.
Yep. Okay. Thanks.